On Mother's Day, my son, a successful and constantly occupied businessman, arrived at my home carrying a vibrant bouquet that seemed as bright as the Sunday morning itself. He set the flowers down, his gaze kind yet somehow detached. "Mom," he began, "my wife is still sending you the $5,000 each month, isn't she? I just need to know you're living comfortably." I went rigid. My heart began to hammer in my chest. $5,000? For the last 8 months, my survival had depended on food parcels from St. Mary's and the small kindnesses of my neighbors. My voice was a trembling whisper. "Son, I've been getting by with help from the church." He just looked at me, his smile evaporating instantly. Just then, my daughter-in-law made her entrance. She was a vision in a silk gown and glossy heels, enveloped in an expensive perfume that filled my small home like a taunt. Her smile was brilliant, yet her eyes held a chill deeper than any winter I could recall. She had no idea that this very day marked the beginning of the end for her polished facade. If you're following this story, let me know where you're from. Each comment marks a step on this path. And if my experience resonates with you, please like it so others might see it too. I am Margaret Hayes. I'm a 67-year-old widow, and I reside by myself in a modest home just outside Dallas, Texas. This house was once loud with joy. It's where my late husband and I brought up our only child, David. Since my husband's fatal heart attack a decade ago, I've adjusted to a quieter life. I look after my garden, I cook, and sometimes I lead Bible studies at St. Mary's, which is just down the road. My means were limited, but I had what I needed. That is, until the realities of aging set in, and the cost of everything seemed to climb higher every day. David, the child I once held, is now 38 and a millionaire. He's the proprietor of a string of technology firms, operates a new Tesla, and resides in a Park Cities estate where the yearly taxes alone are more than I made in my lifetime. Naturally, I was immensely proud of him. I raised him myself, trusting he would become a decent, compassionate, and appreciative man. So, as he entered my home that afternoon, the sun lighting up his weary but still handsome features, my heart swelled with affection, right up until the moment he spoke. "Mom, my wife is still sending you the $5,000 each month, isn't she?" The words seemed to pull all the oxygen from the air. My heart thudded violently, and I found my hands twisting the fabric of my old apron. I attempted a smile, but my mouth was parched. $5,000, I echoed, my voice breaking. "Son, the church has been helping me make ends meet." David's expression shifted from confusion to shock, his smile vanishing. His gaze shifted to the woman entering behind him, Clara. His wife, dressed in a silk gown the color of pearls with glittering silver shoes. The aroma of Chanel No. 5 wafted into my modest living room, easily overpowering the scent of the apple pie I'd baked for David. Clara offered a slight smile, the kind that could disarm anyone, if not for its underlying chill. "Oh, Mother, you must not remember," she said, her voice smooth and sweet as honey poured over ice. "I drop by with the money every month. Surely you recall?" I met her gaze steadily. "If you truly brought it, it must have gone missing along the way," I replied, my voice just above a whisper. An intense silence filled the room. I could hear the wall clock ticking, the distant sound of traffic, and the pulse beating in my own ears. David looked back and forth between us, his elderly mother in her faded apron and his sophisticated wife in her designer outfit, his brow creased in confusion. "Clara, you have been bringing the money, haven't you?" "I send it to your account every month." Clara tilted her head, her smile never faltering. "Of course, David. I visit her monthly. Perhaps Mother just forgot. You know how memory can be at her age." Her words were gentle, but they struck my heart with the force of a rock. Old age. It was a phrase I'd heard far too often since my husband passed, usually from people who dismissed a widow as an irrelevant, fading mind. But I knew my own mind. I could recall every expense, every prayer, and every person at St. Mary's. And I was certain, with no trace of doubt, that Clara had never handed me so much as a dime. I gave a small nod, opting for silence. Certain conflicts are better observed before they are fought. David got up, came to my side, and put a hand on my shoulder. Mom, this must be a simple mix-up. I'll look into the bank records. My only wish is for you to live well, without any stress. I managed a weak smile, but deep inside, a silent storm of suspicion and determination had just awoken. I didn't say another word. I just cleared his plate and set a glass of orange juice before him. As David took his seat, Clara glided over, placing a proprietary hand on his shoulder. She looked me over, her expression cool and dismissive, the look of a person who thinks integrity is just another commodity to be bought. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Despite the bright sun outside, a shiver went right through me. Clara's eyes scanned the room, briefly landing on the old photographs on the wall, David as a small child, blonde, bright-eyed, and smiling without a care. She let out a small breath. You've really done well keeping this place so tidy, Mother. Especially at your age. I gave a faint smile. I am old, yes. But not so old that I can't remember who has, and has not, walked through my doorway, Clara. David looked at me, distressed. Mom, please, it's Mother's Day. Let's not argue. I just want you to be happy. My son, I replied, my gaze fixed on Clara, I want that too. But happiness isn't built on what people claim they've done. It's built on what they truly do. David went still. Clara's smile faltered, tightened, and then vanished completely. After their departure, I remained in the living room by myself. The sun cast long beams through the curtains, illuminating the worn wooden table. $5,000. Every month. For 8 months. That was $40,000. It was enough money to repair my leaking roof, buy a new refrigerator, and allow me to live my remaining years with dignity. Instead, I had been rationing canned goods from the church and being grateful for donated bread. I put a hand to my chest, feeling not rage, but a profound, silent ache that settled deep in my bones. Later that evening, I took out the old notebook where I usually wrote shopping lists and prayers. This time, I inscribed something else, find the truth. And just below that, do not trust false tears. I shut the book, inhaling deeply. I was not a weak woman. I had endured loss, solitude, and hardship, and I would endure this. David may have been deceived, but I was not. If Clara believed I would just sit by while she maintained her facade, she had severely misjudged me. I passed the remainder of the afternoon in my kitchen as the sun cast golden stripes across the floorboards. My jasmine tea grew cold, but I didn't move, just stared at my old telephone. I questioned myself, could I be mistaken? Was it a bank error? Did Clara mail it? Was it possible that, in a moment of age-related confusion, I had forgotten? No. I remembered every detail, every minor gift I'd been given. There had been no mail, no envelopes, and no money from my son. That night, I retrieved my old financial ledger, which I had maintained from my time as treasurer for the church's women's group. I scanned the pages, each entry exact, $12 for medication, $24 for the electric bill, $10 for the St. Mary's community supper. Every cost was meticulously noted. There was no record of a transfer from David Hayes. Not a single one. The following morning, I walked to the First Texas Community Bank, where I held my small savings account. I sat before a young teller, Molly, and gave her my passbook. Could you please check for any transfers from David Hayes? He mentioned he's been sending $5,000 monthly for the past 8 months. Molly seemed surprised. She typed for a moment, then gently shook her head. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hayes. There's nothing here. The only recent activity was a $1.35 interest deposit in February. I nodded, offered my thanks, and left the bank. The Texas morning breeze rustled my gray hair as I stood on the pavement, a heavy, sinking feeling in my chest. No deposits. No mail. No word. Nothing. For 8 months, I'd been meticulously clipping coupons, choosing canned goods over fresh produce, and offering quiet prayers of thanks for every food parcel from the church. I was accustomed to solitary meals and counting my pennies before shopping, but I had never, ever, conceived that the reason for my hardship was a deception. I returned home, put down my handbag, and sat perfectly still. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock, a wedding present from my husband 4 decades prior. Each sweep of the minute hand seemed to promise, the truth will be revealed. That afternoon, I attended St. Mary's as I always do. Reverend Cole, a man who has known me for 2 decades, found me in the back pew after the service. He approached, his voice gentle. "Mrs. Hayes, is everything all right? You seem weary." I gave a small smile, concealing the tremor in my hands. "I'm just trying to figure out why my son's letters haven't been delivered." The Reverend put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "The Lord works in mysterious ways to reveal the truth. Keep your faith." I nodded, but inwardly, I knew faith alone was no longer sufficient. I required action. That evening, I opened a brown leather journal that David had given me for my 60th birthday. On the first blank page, where a prayer might normally go, I wrote, "If they are lying, I will use the law to make them admit the truth." I pushed the pen firmly, and the words seemed to shine under the lamplight like a solemn oath. Starting that day, I documented every single interaction. When Clara visited, I recorded the date, the time, and precisely what she said. Thursday, June 14th, Clara visited with a cake. Claimed the money was sent and the bank must be slow. No money given. No evidence. Saturday, July 12th, phoned. Stated she was at a charity function and couldn't visit. I could hear the sounds of a restaurant. I recorded it all, entry by entry. I felt no rage, no malice, only the careful precision of a person who had spent her life working with numbers and knew they were incapable of deceit. In the following weeks, Clara's visits continued. She was always impeccably dressed in designer outfits, carrying expensive purses, and wearing high-end shoes. She always came with a small token, flowers, biscuits, or a scented candle, but never the promised envelope. One August afternoon, I was in the garden with my watering can when her white Mercedes appeared in the driveway. Clara emerged, looking radiant and holding a bouquet of lavender. "I brought you these flowers to help you unwind," she said sweetly. "Stress can be so damaging to one's memory." I put the watering can down and dried my hands on my apron. "My memory is perfectly fine, Clara. It's sharp enough to recall that the last time you gave me any money was, never." A muscle in her cheek jumped, but she quickly concealed it with a brilliant smile. "Oh, Mother, you must be confused. I have been sending it. The bank must be making an error." I smiled and started to put the lavender in a vase. "Perhaps. But I've already spoken to the bank. They confirmed nothing has arrived for 8 months." A heavy silence fell. It seemed even the birds on the fence went quiet. Clara nervously toyed with her necklace. "I will check on it again," she said abruptly. She then rushed back to her car, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. I stood and watched her drive off, a combination of clarity and bitterness rising in my chest. She was lying, and now she was aware that I knew it. That night, I made an entry, Clara, August 22nd. Lied. Appeared nervous. Left abruptly. Each word I wrote felt like it was tapping away at the pain inside me. I was no longer the fragile mother offering silent prayers. I was Margaret Hayes, a woman who had endured grief, financial strain, and broken promises. I would endure this and recover the truth. Over the next few weeks, I called David's bank, inquiring vaguely about family gift transfers. While they couldn't give me private details, one sympathetic employee gave me a clue. If the money was sent, he hinted, it would have to be deposited into an account with your name. If you didn't get it, it's possible someone opened a different account using your name. His words sent a shiver through me. A separate account, using my name, but not belonging to me. I shut my notebook, breathing out slowly. I understood the nature of my opponent. Clara was clever, charismatic, and manipulative, easily able to influence her own husband. However, I had been an accountant for 3 separate firms. I had handled millions without misplacing a penny. If someone had the audacity to forge my signature, would discover it. That evening, I reviewed my notes. The lamplight shone on my handwriting, which was shaky but firm. I could almost hear my late husband's voice. "Margaret," he used to say, "if anyone underestimates you, don't raise your voice. Just let them hear the sound of the truth." I closed the journal, overcome with a strange sense of peace. The next day, I returned to the church. I carried a small envelope containing copies of my notes. I gave it to Reverend Cole, speaking quietly, "Father, if I ever miss a service unexpectedly, please hold on to this for me." He looked concerned. "Margaret, what is this about?" I smiled, gentle but resolute. "I'm just ensuring the truth has a voice." On the walk home, my heart was lighter, as if a great burden had been removed. I understood the path forward would be difficult, filled with pain, tears, and deceit, but I was no longer fearful. I would recover every $5,000 that was taken. But even more importantly, I would take back the dignity they assumed I had lost to old age. As the sun dipped behind the oaks, I sat on my porch watching the crimson sky. In the fading light, I whispered, "Clara, you chose the wrong mother to deceive. I still have a few things to teach you." I smiled to myself, shut my notebook, and added one final sentence to the page: "The first step toward justice is memory." In the quiet of the Texas twilight, I knew my battle was only just beginning. The Texas air that morning felt unusually warm, with the wind carrying scents of jasmine and dry grass from my backyard. I was pruning my lavender when I detected the smooth, quiet rumble of a high-end car engine. My heart clenched as I heard tires on the gravel drive. A new, silver Lexus pulled up, its finish so bright it made me squint. Clara emerged, looking as flawless as a model in a magazine. She had on a cream-colored linen dress, large sunglasses, and reflective high heels. She was holding a large gift basket tied with a gold bow. She smiled, her voice like honey covering metal. "Mother, I have a small gift for you." David was tied up in meetings all day, so I came instead. I cleaned my hands on my apron, watching her ascend the porch steps. "How considerate. You both must be occupied," I said quietly, not returning her smile. Clara looked over my garden, breathing out. "Goodness, your garden is lovely. I'm amazed you handle it all on your own." "With these 2 hands and some patience," I answered, sticking my shears in the dirt. She set the basket on the table. It held gourmet cookies, orange marmalade, and a small wine bottle, all beautifully presented but utterly devoid of genuine warmth. I recognized the type of gift: costly, attractive, and hollow. I took a seat in my wooden chair, poured us both iced tea, and met her gaze directly. "Clara, I need to ask. Where is this month's $5,000, the money you were supposed to bring?" For just an instant, her smile faltered, a flicker as brief as a cloud crossing the sun. Then she laughed, a brittle, empty sound. "Oh, Mother, I must have forgotten it in the car." Her voice went up a notch, and she toyed with her glass, not taking a sip. My eyes drifted to the driveway, where the Lexus shimmered in the sun. I could see the reflection on its hood, a brand new car still bearing temporary license plates. It was clearly a very recent acquisition. I smiled slowly. "That's a lovely car, Clara. It must have been expensive." She shrugged, her laugh sounding fragile. "Oh, not really. It was just a necessary upgrade. My boutique business demands I project a certain image." "I see," I said, my voice even. "A new car for your image, but the envelopes for me keep getting left behind. How strange." Her expression tightened for a moment before she manufactured another smile. "Oh, Mother, it sounds like you don't trust me. I'll be sure to bring you the bank statement next time, okay?" I said nothing. We sat in silence, broken only by the soft whir of the porch fan and the insistent chirping of cicadas. Clara was the first to stand, making a show of looking at her watch. "I really must go." I have an appointment with a client. Don't you worry, I'll tell David to send the money again through the bank. I'm so sorry about the confusion. I nodded. Very well, you should go. And try not to forget that envelope in your car again. She paused, her thin smile a mix of irritation and wariness. You're very perceptive, Mother, she said, then turned and left. I watched her retreat. The sound of her heels on the wooden porch was cold and rhythmic, like a countdown. The car door closed, the engine ignited, and the Lexus sped away, vanishing in a flash of reflected sunlight. After the car's sound disappeared, I sat down again, clasping my hands. A heavy pressure settled in my chest. My doubts were gone, I now knew with certainty. I went back inside. My footsteps on the wood floor sounded like a steady heartbeat. I opened the drawer, pulled out my leather journal, and wrote, September 10th. Clara visited alone. Brought gift basket. Lied about leaving money in the car. Has a new Lexus. No proof of payment. Voice was unsteady. Did not make eye contact. I put the pen down and inhaled. My hands were shaking, but my determination was solid. That afternoon, I walked to the post office, which still had public payphones. I didn't want to call from my house, suspecting Clara might be monitoring me. I called David's office, my voice polite and even. Hello, my name is Margaret Hayes, David Hayes's mother. Could I please speak to someone in the accounting department? It's a personal inquiry. After a brief hold, a woman's voice came on the line. This is Sandra Miller, the head accountant. How may I help you, Mrs. Hayes? I held the phone tightly, keeping my voice level. Thank you, Sandra. I just have a small confirmation to make. My son mentioned his company processes a $5,000 payment from his personal account to me each month. I just need to verify if that is accurate. There was a brief silence. Sandra's voice was hesitant when she replied. Mrs. Hayes, I'm not at liberty to share personal financial information, but, let me see. Yes, I do see regular, automated transfers for that exact sum on the same date monthly. The money was definitely sent, though I'm not sure of the final destination. What do you mean? I asked. It wasn't sent to me? I can't be sure, Mrs. Hayes. The name on the recipient account is yours, but the account number itself is different from what I'd expect. I just assumed it was a separate account you held. A cold dread washed over me. I forced my voice to remain steady. Thank you, Sandra. That is all I needed to know. I replaced the receiver and stood still in the phone booth. My heart was pounding, but my mind was perfectly clear. There it was. The truth. Someone had opened a fraudulent account in my name, and only one person was in a position to do it, Clara. As I walked home, my shadow grew long on the pavement. The air smelled of dry earth and scorched grass, reminding me of lean Texas summers from my childhood. My father always used to say, if you want to judge someone's honesty, look at their hands. Honest hands bear the marks of labor. I pictured Clara's hands, long, perfectly manicured, adorned with diamonds, clutching designer bags. Not one callus, not one sign of actual work. I didn't eat dinner that night. I brewed a cup of peppermint tea and sat in the kitchen's warm light. The house was silent save for the fading chirp of the last cicadas. I opened my journal to a new page and wrote, September 10th. Clara visited, elegant and feigning concern. New car, familiar lies. Confirmed with David's company, the money is being sent, but not to me. Tomorrow, the truth starts to unravel. I set the pen aside and closed the book. My reflection in the dark window showed a small, silver-haired woman, but her eyes were still bright with fire. I knew that, come morning, would no longer be a mother just waiting. I would be a person demanding justice. I switched off the light and went onto the porch. The breeze was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine and damp earth. Moonlight illuminated the old garden bench where my husband and I always sat. I touched the worn wood. Frank, I whispered, if you were here, you'd want me to do the right thing, wouldn't you? Only the wind answered, but it was enough that I went inside, bolted the door, and stood before the mirror. The woman looking back was not exhausted or beaten. She was Margaret Hayes, a mother who would not allow her dignity to be stolen. And I was certain that when the sun rose, Clara's elaborate deception would begin to collapse. The following morning, I was in the garden cutting lavender when a firm, deliberate knock sounded at my door. It wasn't a neighbor or the mailman. I dried my hands and opened it. A tall, middle-aged man in a neat, slightly worn charcoal suit stood on the porch. He nodded politely. "Mrs. Margaret Hayes? I am Bennett, the chief accountant at your son's firm, Hayes and Partners." I studied him. "Bennett? I spoke with Sandra yesterday." "Yes, Sandra is my assistant," he confirmed. "She informed me of your phone call, and I felt there were some things you needed to see." His voice was steady and serious, with an undercurrent of regret. I led him inside and offered him water. The morning sun highlighted the weariness in his face. He placed a leather briefcase on my table and opened it, revealing a thick, organized folder. It was filled with printouts and numbers, the language of accounting I knew so well from my career. He pushed the folder toward me. "These are records of 8 separate transfers, $5,000 apiece. $40,000 total," he said slowly. "The recipient, an account in the name of Clara Hayes." A shock went through me, cold as ice. My hands trembled as I examined the pages. The documentation was clear: sender, David Hayes; recipient, Clara Hayes. Verified. It happened on the same date every month, like clockwork, for 8 months. I looked up, my voice tight. "Mr. Bennett, who authorized this account?" He sighed and took off his glasses, polishing them. "Your daughter-in-law, Mrs. Hayes. Every piece of paperwork for this sub-account has her signature, along with a signed authorization from David." I went cold. Authorization? David allowed her to use my name? "He likely didn't scrutinize the documents," Bennett said. "She provided a copy of your ID, which I strongly suspect was a sophisticated forgery. The system flagged it as your designated account, but the funds were routed directly to her." I pressed my hand to my head as the room swam. It was worse than betrayal, it was a deep humiliation. For 8 months, Clara had exploited my name to steal from my son. "And David?" I asked quietly. "He has no idea." Bennett paused. "Honestly, Mrs. Hayes, I doubt it. David is a good man, but his trust is misplaced. He allows Clara to manage the majority of the administrative work." He hesitated, then looked at me directly. "And, she has also been using the corporate credit card for personal items." I just stared. "The company card?" "Yes. The Hayes and Partners corporate card. It's intended for business travel and client expenses. We've recently flagged highly irregular charges, spa treatments, expensive jewelry, designer clothing, and even first-class airfare to New York. It totals over $30,000 in the last quarter alone." I sat in stunned silence. The word spa, jewelry, flights hammered in my mind. I glanced out the window at the bench where Clara and I had sat. I remembered her telling me, "David's so busy, Mother. I take care of everything for him." I now understood everything meant every cent she could get her hands on. I turned back to Bennett, my voice hoarse but strong. "Mr. Bennett, if I decide to bring this to light, will you assist me?" His gaze was unwavering. "Mrs. Hayes, I believe in doing things by the book, and that requires evidence. We must be very meticulous. If we aren't, she will warp the story and set David against you. She is a formidable liar." I nodded. "I'm aware. I've watched her lie with a smile on her face." Bennett offered a faint, grim smile. "I will help. But I need a few days to get everything. I have to gather all the transaction histories, the authorization forms, and get a formal statement from the bank confirming the account is not yours. But I will get you the truth." I looked at him, recognizing something I hadn't seen in ages: true integrity. "Thank you, Mr. Bennet," I said softly. "This means more than you know." He shut the folder and rose to leave. "I'm only doing my job, Mrs. Hayes. And unfortunately, situations like this are far too common. Betrayal often comes from those we trust the most." I nodded, my gaze falling on an old photo of David, age 10, smiling next to his father. I remembered my husband saying, "Maggie, teach that boy to spot the difference between a good man and a smooth one. They often look the same." After Bennett departed, the house fell quiet, leaving me alone with the file on my table. I stared at the stack of papers, each line item a documented piece of her betrayal. I meticulously put the file into a small metal lockbox and stored it under the cabinet. Turning the key felt symbolic, as if I were locking away the last of my trust. The afternoon sun slanted across the porch, lighting my hair. I made a strong cup of black tea and sat at the kitchen table, watching the lavender move in the breeze. The scene was tranquil, but a steady fire was burning inside me. I retrieved my notebook, turned to a new page, and wrote with a firm hand, September 11th. Mr. Bennet visited. He brought proof of 8 $5,000 transfers to an account in Clara Hayes's name. She is also defrauding the company with the credit card. David is being deceived. It's not just my money, it's his. I have an ally. The battle starts now. I put the pen down and gazed out the window. The sky was a fiery red. In a quiet, firm voice, I said to the empty room, "Clara, you overlooked the fact I was an accountant for 4 decades. I know how to read a lie in a ledger, and this time, the numbers will tell the story." I shut the journal, feeling a weight lift. For the first time in 8 months, I wasn't alone. I had a witness, someone who would stand by the facts. That night, my sleep was deeper than it had been in ages. The sound of the crickets seemed like a rhythm of hope. I dreamed Bennett was holding the file as Clara retreated, her expression crumbling as the truth was revealed. When I woke, I knew I was no longer a victim. I was the one initiating the reckoning. 3 days passed. I had every fact aligned in my mind, as organized as a balance sheet. It was time to act. I phoned David. His voice was warm, though I detected a note of fatigue. "Mom, apologies, I've been buried in work. Clara mentioned she's been seeing you often, yes?" I smiled, keeping my voice airy. "She has, dear. Clara is so very kind. I was hoping to have you both over for dinner this Sunday. It's been too long since we all ate together." David happily accepted, completely unaware of the trap concealed in the invitation. I spent Sunday morning cooking. My goal wasn't a gourmet meal, but one that felt entirely normal. I made honey-glazed chicken, mashed potatoes, an apple walnut salad, and David's favorite apple pie. I used my late husband's silverware and set the table with candles. The atmosphere I created was warm, genuine, and perfectly designed to make a confident liar lower her defenses. At 6 o'clock, I heard the Lexus pull up. Clara got out first, looking impeccable in a jade-colored silk dress, her hair in soft waves, leaving a trace of Dior perfume. David followed, holding a bouquet of white lilies. "Mom, you look wonderful," David said, smiling as he set the flowers down. "Son, I feel wonderful, thanks to the Lord and to both of you." Clara smiled, her lips curling with that familiar, self-satisfied expression. I knew that look. It was the look of someone who believes they are in complete control. I served drinks and we chatted about trivial things: the weather, my garden, the new family that moved in down the street. The conversation was easy, as if no deceit had ever entered my home. I let her settle in and feel comfortable. As I served the chicken, I looked up and smiled. "I am so grateful for you too. Especially for this month's $5,000. Clara paused for only a split second before her bright smile returned. She took a sip of wine. "Oh, Mother, don't mention it. I'm just happy to do it." I nodded, affecting a bashful tone. "I'm just so pleased." I was finally able to buy a new heater. It gets cold early in Texas, and having that money makes me feel so much safer. Clara's smile grew wider, full of smug self-satisfaction. She angled her head toward David, as if signaling, "See? She's fine." I watched her for a beat, then asked casually, as if the thought had just struck me, "Oh, Clara, I was just wondering, which day do you typically send it?" She wasn't prepared. The answer was a reflex. "The 10th of every month, Mother." I nodded, saying nothing. But before I could continue, David chimed in, looking confused. "Honey, not the 10th. I have the automatic transfer scheduled for the 15th. The room went utterly still. You can almost hear the snap of a trap closing when a liar walks right into it. If you were in my shoes, facing that kind of deception, would you have remained silent as I did, or would you have confronted them right then and there? Let me know in the comments. I suspect many of us have experienced a tense dinner like that one. The only sound was the sharp scrape of a knife on porcelain. They just stared at one another. Clara blinked, forcing a smile. "Really?" she said, her laugh strained. "I was sure you told me the 10th. David's frown deepened. "No, I'm certain it's the 15th. I chose it to align with my payroll cycle." A cold silence settled over the table. I smiled gently, placing my fork on my plate. "Oh, how perfect. I'll make a trip to the bank on the 15th, then. Just to check that their system is working correctly." Clara produced a brittle laugh, clearly trying to mask her nerves. "Oh, Mother, you're so thorough. There's no need to worry, I've been sending it like clockwork." David nodded, but his expression had changed. He turned to his wife, but before he could speak, she quickly pivoted the conversation to his work and the impending weather. I watched them quietly. I felt a pure, profound calm, the calm of someone who knows, without a doubt, that their plan is working perfectly. After the main course, I served dessert. The scent of cinnamon from the fresh apple pie filled the air. David loved it. Clara barely touched hers, her eyes darting to her watch. She was suffocating in a room she had believed she completely controlled. As they were leaving, I said softly, "Thank you both for visiting. I can't remember the last time I laughed so much." Then I added, "And remember, I'll stop by the bank on the 15th, just to be sure there are no system glitches." Clara's smile was a tight, forced grimace. "Yes, Mother. I'm positive everything is in order." David kissed my cheek, his eyes as kind as ever. But now, I saw something new behind them, the faint, thin shadow of doubt. I stood in the doorway and watched the Lexus's taillights disappear. The wind rustled through the yard, making the old door rattle. I went inside and closed it. The feeling wasn't one of victory, but of release. I walked directly to the small office, and the glow of the computer monitor illuminated the photo of my late husband. His smile felt like an endorsement. I opened my email and began to type a message to the two people I now trusted implicitly, Bennett, the scrupulous accountant, and Amelia Rowe, an old friend from college who was now a specialist in financial fraud. My hands were steady. "It's time. Bennett. Amelia. Everything is in place. I just got Clara to lie about the transfer date, and David contradicted her to her face. They think I'm appeased, but their stories clashed. I want to proceed with our plan. Please begin the full transaction audit and prepare the comparative files. I want all the evidence compiled by the 15th. It's time to let her self-destruct. Margaret." I reread that last line and smiled. Self-destruct. The word felt right, not because I wanted revenge, but because justice would be served by the liar's own actions. I clicked send and leaned back in my chair. The curtains moved in the breeze, carrying the scent of jasmine. I heard the clock ticking, counting down to the 15th, the day the truth would finally break the surface. 2 days later, a reply from Bennett arrived. It was short and to the point, just like him. "I've received bank confirmation. The account in your name was established by Clara using forged identification. They will release the full data upon receipt of a subpoena, which Amelia is handling. We are proceeding. B. I read the message, my chest constricting and then releasing, like an old, rusted gate finally swinging open. I am not a cruel person. I just want the truth to be heard so my son can finally see. I need David to learn that trust is not a bottomless account for someone to drain dry. That evening, I opened my notebook for my ritual. September 13th. Dinner was a success. Clara incriminated herself. David is beginning to see. The bank check is set for the 15th. Justice is approaching, quietly. I closed the journal and blew out my candle. Moonlight streamed into the dark room, falling on my face. I saw my reflection, a small, silver-haired woman with bright eyes. I whispered to the empty room, or perhaps to my husband, Frank, do you see? She thinks she's so clever. But her own words just tightened the noose. All I have to do is be still and wait for the 15th. I smiled. The trap was laid, and the target was walking straight into it. The following morning, the Texas sky was a sharp, clear blue. I sat with my tea, feeling an unusual sense of peace. This was the day Bennett would send the complete file. In a few hours, every lie would be rendered in black ink. Around 8 a.m., the phone rang. It was Bennett. Mrs. Hayes, his voice was low and steady, it's complete. I've just emailed you the full statements and all corresponding invoices. Amelia has seen them. She confirms that with your signature, we have a solid legal case. I thanked him, my voice trembling slightly. I had never thought I would reach an age where I needed lawyers and accountants just to secure the support my own son intended for me. 15 minutes later, the mail arrived. A large, sealed manila envelope marked confidential, Hayes Financial Records. I placed it on the table, staring at it for a moment before I broke the seal. Inside were dozens of pages. 8 transfers, $5,000 each. $40,000. Sender, David Hayes. Recipient, Clara Hayes. It was there in bold print on official bank letterhead. At the bottom, a note in Bennett's blue ink, Mrs. Clara Hayes utilized this as a personal slush fund. In addition to the 8 transfers, note the secondary card charges, spa, retail, travel, and a new car lease. Total expenditures over 8 months, $47,800. I sat motionless. The morning sun cast pale golden bars across the documents, the color of truth. I turned the page. A receipt for $1,200 from a Houston spa. $3,600 for a trip to Cancun. A $15,000 down payment on a new Lexus. Each receipt felt like a small twist of a knife. I remembered her gliding into my home, perfumed and polished, saying, "Mother, I just want you to know I care for you." I finally understood what caring meant to her. I sat for a long time. Then I reached for my brown leather notebook, my Justice Journal. I wrote carefully, September 17th. Bennett's records received. 8 transfers, $5,000 each, all diverted by Clara. Spa, travel, new car. $47,800. The price of my son's trust. My hand shook, not with fear, but with the resolve to reclaim my dignity. That afternoon, Amelia Rowe called. Her voice was precise, the sound of someone who has won difficult battles. "Margaret, I've reviewed Bennett's file. It's ironclad. This is a textbook case of elder financial exploitation. We can file criminal charges, or we can pursue this civilly. It's your decision." I paused. "Not yet," I said quietly. "I don't want the court to be the first to see this. David needs to see it. With his own eyes. Justice will only be meaningful if he understands the full truth." Amelia was quiet, then said, "You're right. There is no pain quite like a son discovering his wife has been exploiting his own mother." "Exactly," I agreed. "Which is why I'd like Reverend Cole's help. I want to host a small charity dinner." A pretext. Just to get them here. Amelia gave a soft, knowing laugh. A staged event to reveal the truth. Very smart, Margaret. I'll have Bennett create a condensed summary for David. Something he can't possibly ignore. Near dusk, I drove to St. Mary's. Reverend Cole was arranging chairs in the hall. After I laid out my plan, he smiled kindly. Sometimes, Margaret, the Lord doesn't use thunder to expose a sin. All he needs is the small, quiet light of the truth. I squeezed his hand. I just want David to see that light. This isn't for revenge. It's to make him stop being blind. On the way back, I stopped for a few things for the dinner I was planning. The world outside looked so normal, giving no indication that Clara's entire life was about to implode. That night, I opened Bennett's file again. I laid every statement and receipt out on my dining table. With a red pen, I circled the largest withdrawals, then placed them all into a thick beige envelope. On the front, I wrote in clear, steady script, donation documents, senior assistance fund. Only I knew it contained nothing but deceit. I stared at the papers. My hands trembled, not from fear, but because I could feel my heart beating strongly for the first time in months. I had been made to feel like a weak, old widow. But looking at that pile of proof, I knew I had never been weak. I had only been gaslighted into believing I was that. I remembered what my husband always said: if someone does you wrong, don't pray for them to apologize. Just hold up a mirror and let them see their own reflection. I whispered, I'm about to do just that. Around 8 p.m., Bennett called. Mrs. Hayes, Amelia has the paperwork ready to file, but I agree with your timing. Waiting for the right moment is smart. Clara will incriminate herself. I know, I said. Thank you, Bennett. You've done more than an accountant's duty. You've restored my faith in justice. After we hung up, I locked the file in my cabinet, right below the drawer with my family photos. I closed it and turned the key. The soft click was a small sound, but it felt final, like a promise fulfilled. That night, my notebook entry was brief. Bennett compiled all evidence, statements, receipts, travel, car. Over $40,000 from my allowance. Amelia confirms elder financial exploitation case. But I will not go to court first. My son must see. Reverend Cole will help with the charity dinner. The envelope will be waiting. My hands shake, not with fear, but with resolve. Tonight, I will sleep. I set the pen down. The lamp cast a glow on an old photo of David as a little boy, his smile pure. I touched the frame. You once told me I was the person you trusted most, I whispered. I'm going to make you remember that. I lay down, and for the first time in 8 long months, I slept deeply. I wasn't at peace because Clara was punished, but because I knew the truth was finally on my side. I had never anticipated a Sunday evening more. The Texas sun cast a golden light over my garden as the beef stew, David's childhood favorite, simmered on the stove. This time, the meal wasn't just an act of love, it was a prelude to a reckoning. On the table, I placed my best porcelain, wine glasses, and a crisp white cloth. In the center sat the beige envelope, a silent, waiting guest. Around 7 p.m., the Lexus arrived. David wore a simple shirt. Clara, as usual, was dressed to the nines in a silk dress and pearls. Mom. David hugged me. It smells like home. I made it just for you, I smiled. Clara's polished smile was fixed in place. How lovely, Mother. You always make things so special. Yes, I said softly. Tonight will be very special. Minutes later, Reverend Cole arrived, carrying a large white envelope. Here are those donation papers you requested, he said. Clara tilted her head. Oh. So it is a charity dinner? I thought you were joking, Mother. I poured the wine. Yes. A dinner to discuss trust, generosity, and honesty. Clara tensed, but David remained oblivious. Once we were seated, I opened the envelope from the Reverend. Bennett's work was pristine. I pulled out the top sheet. "Son," I said slowly, "this is a summary of the donations made to me for the past 8 months. I'd like you to review it." David looked confused. "Donations? Mom, I send you transfers." I slid the bank statement to him. The recipient name was in bold print, Clara Hayes. $5,000. 15th of each month. David fell silent, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. Clara immediately jumped in, her voice high-pitched. "That must be a bank error, Mother. You've been getting the money, haven't you? They mix up recipient names constantly." My voice was calm. "Is that right? Then I suppose this $1,200 spa bill from Houston, charged to a secondary card in your name, was also a bank error?" Her face hardened, but she forced a laugh. "Oh, dear. Someone must have used my name." "No, Mrs. Hayes," a deep voice interrupted from the doorway. "No one used your name by accident. I prepared those records." Everyone turned. Bennett stood in the threshold, holding another file. Clara went pale. David looked at him, lost. "Who are you?" "I'm Bennett," he said, "chief accountant at your company. I'm also the one your mother authorized to investigate the funds being transferred in her name." The air in the room solidified. I stood up. "Bennett can confirm every transaction. 8 transfers of $5,000. Not 1 cent ever reached me." David turned to his wife, his voice cracking. "Clara, what is this?" She grabbed his arm, tears instantly filling her eyes. I just borrowed it, David. I was going to return it. I didn't want to bother your mother." I sighed. "Borrowing? For 8 months? By forging bank documents in my name?" Clara sobbed, but her tears were pure desperation, not guilt. David ripped his hand away from her, his eyes blazing. "What did you do to my mother?" he yelled, his voice shaking with rage. "I sent that money for her comfort. You used it for vacations, and spas, and a car. And you lied to me? You don't understand." Clara cried, backing away. "Enough." David slammed his hand on the table. The glasses jumped. The only sounds were Clara's frantic breaths and my own heart pounding. Reverend Cole, silent until now, spoke. "Sometimes, God doesn't punish. He simply holds up a mirror." I sat back down. "You know, Clara, I didn't even need the money. I needed respect. You stole that from me, and you stole it from your husband." "Mother, I'm sorry," she stammered. "I just wanted to help David. I didn't mean." "Stop lying," I said flatly. "You didn't help. You stole." Bennett stepped forward and placed the final file in front of David. "These are the originals, Mr. Hayes. The forged authorizations, the bank records, the receipts. You'll need these to protect what's left." David stared at the numbers, then looked at me. His eyes were filled with shame and a painful awakening. "Mom. I'm so sorry. I was a fool." I put my hand on his. "No, son. Trusting isn't the mistake. Betraying that trust is." Clara exploded in sobs. "I can't take this," she shrieked, jumping to her feet. "I don't need your pity. Believe her if you want." She grabbed her purse and stormed out, her heels hammering the floor like punctuation. David didn't move. The front door slammed shut. Silence. The smell of stew hung in the air, heavy with the truth. "It's over," I said quietly. Bennett nodded. Reverend Cole put a hand on my shoulder. "You did what many mothers would not have the courage to do, Margaret." I smiled faintly, but the victory felt hollow. After they left, I cleared the table, the half-eaten food, the wine, the empty chair where Clara sat. I looked at the scattered papers, proof of an 8-month lie, shattered in a single evening. My hands trembled as I stacked them neatly. I had my dignity back. Outside, the wind blew. I looked up at the sky, the moonlight shining on the envelope. I knew every lie eventually finds the light. Tonight, it had found the light in my home. I picked up the envelope and saw the blue stamp, Texas County Court. My chest tightened. I knew this was coming, but it still felt heavy. Inside was the official notice, case number 23 CF 98-1, Margaret Hayes, plaintiff, v. Clara Hayes, defendant. Charges, elder financial exploitation and fraud. Amelia had filed it immediately. Her message was brief, all evidence submitted. Preliminary hearing is next Monday. I set the letter down. Justice was near, but I felt no joy. The morning of the hearing, the sky was a flat, sharp gray. Amelia met me at the courthouse. "Are you holding up, Margaret?" she asked. "I am," I said. "I just wish it hadn't come to this." The courtroom hallway smelled of old paper and tension. When we entered, Clara was already there. She sat in a black suit, her face pale, trying to look calm. A nervous-looking young lawyer sat beside her. David was seated in the row behind them, alone. He looked hollowed out, staring at nothing. As I sat, Clara glanced at me with a look of pure defiance. The gavel struck. Court is in session for the case of Margaret Hayes versus Clara Hayes. Amelia stood, her voice clear. "Your Honor, for 8 months, the defendant, Mrs. Clara Hayes, systematically misappropriated $40,000 intended for her mother-in-law, using a fraudulent bank account. Furthermore, the defendant used a corporate credit card for personal luxuries, including travel, spa treatments, and a vehicle." The room was quiet as Amelia laid out the evidence, the statements, the Lexus invoice, the Cancun tickets. "The defendant didn't just steal from a 67-year-old widow, Your Honor. She concealed it by forging legal documents. This was a deliberate, systematic deception." Clara's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. My client asserts this was a simple misunderstanding of household finances. Mrs. Margaret Hayes is elderly and has admitted to being forgetful." My blood ran hot. Clara looked at the judge, her voice trembling. "Your Honor, my mother-in-law, she forgets things. I brought her money many times, but she doesn't recall. I never meant any harm. She just misunderstood." I wanted to scream. Amelia put a hand on my arm, then addressed the judge, her voice like steel. "Your Honor, Mrs. Hayes's memory was sharp enough to document every single visit from the defendant. I submit her journal as evidence." Amelia held up my brown leather notebook. In this, Mrs. Hayes recorded 8 months of dates, times, and the defendant's exact excuses, such as, "I left the envelope in the car." Every entry aligns perfectly with the bank records. If that is memory loss, it's the most precise case I've ever seen. A murmur went through the gallery. The judge peered at the file, then turned his gaze to Bennett, who had been called as an expert witness. "Mr. Bennett," the judge asked, "do you verify the figures presented in this report?" Bennett rose, straightened his tie, and spoke with firm authority. "Your Honor, as the chief accountant for Hayes and Partners, I confirm all statements and reconciliations are accurate. Every transfer originated from Mr. David Hayes's personal account, directed to an account bearing the name Margaret Hayes. However, that fraudulent account was, in fact, established and exclusively controlled by the defendant, Mrs. Clara Hayes." The judge nodded, his face stern. I glanced at Clara. Her head was bowed, her nails biting into her palms, her face ashen. Amelia pressed on. "Your Honor, under the Texas Elder Protection Act, the defendant's actions constitute clear financial exploitation of an elder, as well as marital financial fraud. We petition the court to mandate the defendant repay the full sum, plus interest and legal fees, and furthermore, to bar her from accessing or managing any financial accounts held by Mr. David Hayes for a period of 5 years." No one moved. The steady tick of the wall clock was the only sound. The judge looked up, his voice decisive and final. Having reviewed all documentation, testimony, and evidence, this court rules, the defendant, Mrs. Clara Hayes, will repay the $40,000 in full to Mrs. Margaret Hayes. The defendant is hereby stripped of all access and management rights concerning her husband, Mr. David Hayes's, financial accounts. The defendant is also ordered to complete a 6-month mandatory financial rehabilitation program. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck 3 times, a dry, cold sound, like a heavy door locking. Clara slumped in her chair. I watched as she fought to maintain her composure, but tears soon streamed down her cheeks. She turned to David, her voice desperate. "You have to believe me. I never meant for this." David didn't respond. He simply looked at her, his eyes devoid of emotion, and then turned his gaze away. That single moment broke my heart. I felt no victory, no triumph. There was only a profound ache, the realization that to win justice, I had to witness my son's marriage disintegrate. I had always hoped David would find happiness with someone who truly loved him, in a home built on care. Now, that dream was gone, lost within the pages of a court file. Amelia gently touched my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Margaret. You didn't just save yourself, you saved your son." I nodded, though I couldn't manage a smile. I understood then that justice is a double-edged blade. It cuts away the lies, but it also severs the delicate bonds of family. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the sky had turned a dark, bruised gray. A heavy rain began to fall, striking the stone steps and shattering into tiny droplets. I stood under the overhang, looking out. The rain felt cold, but I felt a sense of release. There was no victory parade, only the quiet peace of knowing I had seen the pursuit of justice through to its end. I whispered into the rain, "David, I don't know if you'll forgive me." But I held on to the one thing I couldn't lose, the truth. The rain continued to fall as I walked away, leaving the courthouse behind, a place where justice was served, but a mother's heart had quietly cracked. After the trial, an almost unsettling quiet settled over my house. The unexpected visits and urgent phone calls stopped. There was only the sound of the wall clock and the sight of sunlight illuminating the dust motes in the air. Months went by. David didn't visit. He didn't call. There were no messages, no, "How are you, Mom?" I didn't resent him. I knew he was navigating the ruins of his life and marriage. But on lonely nights, I'd often pick up my phone and just stare at his name in my contacts, my thumb hovering over the call button, before setting it back down. I was learning that part of being a mother is knowing when silence is the only thing that allows your child to heal. The restitution payment, $40,000, arrived one June morning. I saw that deposit completed email from the bank. I had expected to feel relief, but I just felt empty. I sat there for a long time until a new idea formed. If this money had been used for deceit, its new purpose must be one of goodness. I used a little of it to fix my roof, buy new curtains, and finally get that new heater. With the rest, I met with Reverend Cole and Amelia. "I want to start a foundation," I told them. "I'll call it the Grace Hands Foundation. Its mission will be to help elderly individuals who've been financially abused by their own families, just like I was." Reverend Cole looked at me, a gentle smile forming. "Margaret, this is more than kindness. This is how God transforms pain into a seed of hope." Amelia, always practical, opened her notebook. "We'll file as a nonprofit. I'll handle the legal work, Reverend Cole can be the community liaison, and you, Margaret, will be the founder." I laughed softly. "I don't need to be the founder, Amelia. I'm just a mother who remembered how to stand up for herself." 3 months later, the Grace Hands Foundation opened in the basement of St. Mary's. We had 3 desks, an old printer, and a wooden sign, helping the forgotten find their voice again. Every week, people came to us. An old woman whose daughter had tricked her into signing over her house. A widower whose grandson had emptied his pension. An elderly woman whose signature was forged on a loan. Each story was a fresh wound, but I had learned to listen without judgment. I held their hands and told them what I knew: the truth doesn't always arrive when you want it, but it always arrives on time. Amelia worked to secure grants and train volunteers. I handled what I called the heart work, listening, offering comfort, and documenting their cases. One afternoon, Reverend Cole said quietly, "Isn't it remarkable, Margaret? Your pain has become a light for so many." I smiled. Maybe that's just God's way of giving a new ending to those who were betrayed. As the foundation gained notice, reporters started calling. They wanted to interview the brave widow who sued her wealthy daughter-in-law. I was invited on talk shows, even offered a book deal. I turned them all down. Justice can be public, I told Amelia, but healing must be private. At night, I started a new ritual. I'd light a small candle by the photo of David and me. "Where are you, son?" I'd whisper. "I'm not angry. I just hope you learned something from this." I realized forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about refusing to let the wound define you. When Reverend Cole asked if I'd forgiven Clara, I said, "I think so. I no longer wish her ill. But I will never forget." One autumn morning, Amelia arrived with an envelope. "We've received a major grant from the Elder Justice Fund," she announced. Who would have thought that a woman once living on church donations would now be helping others reclaim their dignity? I just smiled, a real, gentle smile. Still, on quiet nights, the wind sometimes sounds like my son's voice. I know David isn't ready. Perhaps he's still forgiving himself. I wait, not because I'm dependent on him, but because love survives even the deepest betrayal. I know that if he ever knocks on my door, I will open it. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've learned to love without letting myself be broken. I light my candle, watching the flame dance. "My son," I whisper, "trust is the most precious thing we have. Once broken, it takes a lifetime to rebuild." The flame flickers, and my heart feels calm. The storm has passed. This stillness is mine. That night, a severe storm raged until midnight. The wind howled, and I was reviewing foundation files when I heard a knock, soft, urgent, and cold. It was past 10 p.m. My hand trembled as I opened the door. David stood there, drenched, his hair matted to his head, his eyes red and exhausted. Time stopped. He looked like a lost child. "Mom," his voice broke. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I've been such a fool." Before I could speak, he collapsed to his knees on the entryway floor, burying his face in his hands, his body shaking with raw, broken sobs. The man who thought he knew everything was crumbling in the house where I'd raised him. I knelt beside him. "David, get up," I said softly. "Everyone stumbles. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about saving yourself." He looked up, tears and rain mixing on his face. "I don't deserve it. I doubted you. I let her manipulate me. I stayed silent while you were suffering. Mom, I've lost everything." I shook my head, guiding him to the sofa, gently drying his hair with a towel, just as I did when he was a boy. "I don't need an apology," I said. "I just need you to remember that the truth only waits until we're brave enough to face it." He stared into the fireplace. After a long silence, he whispered, "Clara's gone, Mom." I stopped. "She drained the accounts," he continued, his voice trembling, "took what was left from the company, and disappeared. They said she left with a man she knew before we were even married. She left one note, 'You trusted the wrong person.'" I closed my eyes. There was no anger, just a deep, quiet sadness. I took his hand. "No, son," I said. "You just realized the truth too late. But even when trust is broken, it's what separates us from those who deceive." He rested his head on my shoulder, a child home at last. "I lost everything, Mom. My career, my money, my dignity." "No," I stroked his hair. "You found something more important tonight, the heart to admit when you're wrong." I made him tea, and he sat by the fire. "I don't understand how you're so calm," he said. "Because justice isn't about revenge, it's about balance," I smiled. Clara is reaping what she sowed. He was quiet, then suddenly asked, Mom, can I help with your foundation? I want to do something that matters. From that day, David came every weekend. He brought coffee, organized files, and sometimes went with Amelia to record victim stories. People say time heals, but for me, it was watching my son's transformation that mended my heart. One morning, I saw him focused on a spreadsheet, the sun in his hair, and I saw the boy who once asked me, Mom, what does honesty mean? David? He looked up. You've walked through your pain, son, I said, smiling. Not everyone can do that. He smiled back, a real smile. Only because of you, Mom. I don't know how long I would have drowned in my guilt otherwise. I didn't save you, David, I said warmly. You saved yourself. Outside, a light rain fell. I looked at the open door where he had stood that stormy night. Life, I realized, always leaves a path for those who want to return. As I watched my son smile, I knew the storm was truly over. Peace had finally come home. One autumn morning, sunlight streamed onto my desk. I took out a fresh sheet of paper and a pen. Clara, thank you. The words flowed easily. Because of you, I learned the true value of honesty and self-respect. You taught me that truth only has meaning when we are brave enough to defend it. You took my money, but you gave me freedom. I smiled softly. I don't know where you are, but I want you to know, I forgive you. Not for your sake, but because I refuse to stay chained to the darkness you created. I folded the letter and placed it in an old wooden box of my husband's, next to a note he once wrote, Margaret, truth doesn't need to be shouted, only lived. I closed the lid, the soft click sounding like the end of a chapter. In the months after, the Grace Hands Foundation grew rapidly. We welcomed so many people, all clinging to the belief that justice still exists. One day, David stopped by with coffee. I can't believe how big this has become, Mom, he said, his voice thick with pride. You really turned your pain into light. I chuckled. Not the light of God, son. The light of justice. God forgives, but justice never forgets. He nodded slowly. I think I'm finally starting to understand that. In his eyes, I saw the man he had become, not the one who fled the truth, but the one who now respected it. I'm no longer poor. The days of needing church food are gone, but I'm not ashamed of them. They taught me the dignity of endurance. I've learned that self-respect is worth more than any amount of money. Now, I wake early, make my tea, and open the windows. The sun hits the photo of my husband and me. I smile at him. You'd be proud, wouldn't you? I know he would be, not because I got the money back, but because I never let anyone else define my worth. That evening, I opened my journal one last time. The thief is gone, but the lesson remains. I closed the book, feeling a sense of peace. No revenge, just the knowledge that honesty still matters. In the darkness, I whispered, Thank you, Clara. You took everything, only to teach me that the most important thing isn't holding on, but learning how to rise again. A year later, Texas bloomed. I was brewing tea when the phone rang. Mrs. Margaret Hayes? Congratulations. You've been selected as Texas Woman of the Year for your contributions to social justice and senior rights. A year ago, I was a widow living on aid. Now, I was a symbol of justice. The ceremony was in the city courthouse. I wore a simple blue dress. When I walked on stage, the room applauded. I saw David in the second row, his eyes shining with a pride I hadn't seen since he was a child. Thank you, I began, my voice steady. I'm here to tell the story of an unnamed mother, deceived by her daughter-in-law, who lost her money and her trust. I once thought silence was the best response to betrayal. I was wrong. When someone steals your trust, you reclaim it with truth. Not with hatred, but with truth. Because truth has a power that punishment will never have. The applause was heartfelt. I saw David wiping his eyes. He finally understood. Justice isn't just a verdict, I concluded softly. It begins the moment you find the courage to say enough, even to someone you love. That is the bravest act any human can do. Afterward, as I stood outside in a light rain, David draped his jacket over my shoulders. "Mom," he said quietly, "I've never seen you shine like this." I smiled, holding his hand. "It's not the award, son. It's because you're here, and you finally understand what honesty means." "I do, Mom," he smiled back. "And I promise to live by it." That night, I wrote the final line in my journal: a mother's greatest victory isn't winning in court. It's teaching her child the value of honesty. I closed the book. My life wasn't grand or loud, but it was peaceful, and it was full. And if you are still with me, thank you for listening to the very end of my journey. If you've ever faced injustice or betrayal in your own family, please share your story in the comments. Your voice today might give someone else hope for tomorrow. And if you believe, as I do, that the truth always finds its way home, please like, subscribe, and join me for more stories. From Texas, with gratitude, I'm Margaret Hayes, a mother who found her own happiness in her own peaceful way.